Hi, Zach Reiser here, and welcome back to another Bass Effects review video. Today I'm going to be getting into the Microcosm from Hologram Electronics. Like everything that Hologram makes, it is hard to kind of sum up what the Microcosm actually is. That's one thing I really enjoy about this company, is that they never strive to repeat anything. All of their stuff is novel ideas, and everything from the enclosure to the design, and then of course the way that things sound as well. In short, and in my opinion, the Microcosm is essentially a granular synthesizer for guitar or bass or whatever you want to plug into it. It's kind of a multi-tap delay, a reverb, but it's got all kinds of interesting algorithms that really splice up and chop up your signal to create really unique textures. Now, the Microcosm, like most hologram pedals, does come across as a little bit complex on the surface, but also like all hologram pedals, it is very easy to just start twisting knobs and kind of diving in and getting awesome sounds to come out of this thing. And that's really how I want to treat this video. It's going to be kind of experimental. We're just going to find some cool sounds along the way. But so you have an idea of what I'm doing as I twist knobs, I do want to give you a rough rundown of what is on the surface. Okay, starting with the knobs. Now, they're all a little tricky because they all have kind of multiple things that they can do depending on the mode. You really have to look at the manual if you want to know exactly what's happening because it's different for almost every single mode. However, the activity and the repeats are essentially you can think of as like feedback or resonance of the amount of kind of clicks and clacks and delays and little things that go on there. Activity is kind of how dense of a structure it is. Repeats is how many of those structures are repeated over time. The shape and filter knob are kind of integrated. Not every single preset, as far as I can tell, utilizes the shape or filter knob, but the ones that do, it will adjust either the filter cutoff or sometimes I think the volume with that shape knob. And it is integrated to the time knob as well, which can be kind of an open time where you just turn the knob to set your kind of rough subdivision, or a tap tempo, which is how I'll have it set for most of the video. The space knob is incredibly powerful. Honestly, I didn't touch it for the first day or so, and then I was like, why did I not turn this knob up after the first day? It's a beautiful sounding reverb, and there's actually kind of some different characters and colors of reverbs you can get out of this thing, and it really is sensitive. It has a very broad range from almost barely noticeable to extreme wash of reverb. And then finally, the last two knobs are just the level of the loop if you're using the looper, and then kind of the mix of dry to wet. Moving over to the right side of the pedal is this singular encoder knob, which is really kind of the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this pedal. It's where we get to choose all of the different preset algorithms that are inside of the Microcosm. It's also how you would save user presets if you wanted to save your own presets. And then right below that is essentially things to do with the looper. I'm not going to be getting into the details of that, but it's little things like, do you want it to be quantized? Do you want the effect to be post or pre the looper, etc. You get the idea. All right, jumping right in, here is my bass's dry tone Dingwall ABZ Six String with Tomastic Infeld flats. All right, so we're going to go through kind of block by block, so to speak, on the Microcosm. And you can see that within each block, there's sub-modes. And then within each sub-mode, there are sub-sub-modes. So we have Mosaic here. And of course, I can do Mosaic A, Mosaic B, C, or D. Now, these different kind of sub-modes are just kind of subtle flavor differences. So for instance, on Mosaic, it's little loops that are chopped up. And if you're in A, it's going to be octaves up. If you're in B, it's going to be octave down. If you're in D, for instance, a mixture of both, I believe. And I'm just going to kind of cycle through some different sounds so you can hear what this micro loop setting sounds like. Moving on to sequence. This is kind of like little chopped up phrases that are a little bit more repetitive, a little more looped, and they almost kind of imply almost like an arpeggiator vibe sometimes. It can be somewhat random depending on the setting. It can be very repetitive depending on the setting. And I think even in mode D, there's some filtering and bit crushing going on, so it gets pretty synthy pretty quickly. So sticking with that kind of sequence mode B, I want to run in a much synthier signal because I already found it to be very synthy arpeggiator kind of sounding. So I'm running my Boss OC2 into a 3-leaf audio Doom 2 fuzz pedal into a Moog low pass filter, which will all be running into the microcosm. But without the microcosm, I sound like this. Very brassy. Now let's run that into that kind of arpeggiated sound. So last up in the micro loop section is the glide, and this is one of my favorites for just kind of pretty harmonic work. It's a really cool effect. It kind of slides in between those two different frequency settings. Let's move on to the Granules module. Now, as the name implies, this is much more kind of granular synthesis focused, so it's going to be lots of tiny little dots, so to speak, that can be smoothed out for very washy sounds or kind of rhythmic and choppy, depending on how you have the settings. Let's just play around with some sounds. So I'm on tunnel mode A here, and I found this very cool for kind of some super spacey, synthy lead style stuff. So I'm running that 3-leaf audio Doom 2 fuzz pedal into the microcosm. The Doom 2 by itself sounds like this. And now into this setting. Moving into the glitch block, and as the name would imply here, this is where things get a little weirder, a little wonkier, a little less predictable. So we have a lot of stuttering effects, we have lots of little kind of pseudo-quick repeating effects, etc. Really cool. You just have to kind of play around with it until you find a setting you like. Let's try this kind of glitched out setting here on blocks mode D. This has a little bit of bit crushing involved as well. And I'm going to run kind of a standard octaver effect into the microcosm. So switching over into interrupt mode here, and getting in, as the name would imply, this is interrupting my signal. So rather than being kind of glitches in the background, it's more glitches in the foreground. And I'm going to run my Boss OC2 into that Doom 2 fuzz pedal again, so it sounds like this, into that particular setting. Finally, moving into the multi-delay block. Now, this is probably the most kind of common effect found in the microcosm. It's just a multi-delay, but it is a very well-manufactured one. It's very pretty and has really kind of subtle repeats in terms of the way that things fade off. So before I get to my last sound sample here, I do want to just briefly talk about the looper. I don't have time to get into it in detail. However, at the beginning of the video, you can hear me using it. And in my opinion, this thing is really designed to be kind of a live sound manipulation device in regards to the looper. You can do things like run the effects into the looper and then loop it, or you can take unaffected looped signal and run it into the effects. You can have it quantized. You can do things like play the loop back in reverse, record something, flip the direction, and then your overdubbed thing is playing in reverse. You can do things like change the speed of your loop. And then if you record something while the speed is changed and then go back to the original tempo, it's pitch shifted. So you have a lot of creative options for how you manipulate the sound kind of in a live fashion. So last sound sample for you here. This is going back to that warp setting. This is just kind of a very pretty multi-tap setting in my opinion. So that is my demo of the Microcosm from Hologram Electronics. As usual for Hologram, a very pretty and unique sounding pedal. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe below. It really does help me out, and I will be back shortly with more pedals and effects demo videos. Thank you so much for watching.